financing your next billion. Gain insights into successful engagements with venture capitalists and investors. Get ahead of industry trends, hear from industry leaders, influencers, founders, policymakers, and governments. Stay in the know on how to finance your next billion.
Welcome to FYNBTalks Podcast, Safeguarding the Planet, Changing the Climate Before It Changes Us. I am thankful and grateful to be a part of the unDavos Summit, and I thank them for featuring the FYNBTalks Podcast on live stream into the World Economic Summit in Davos, Switzerland. Thank you all for joining us there. Good evening to you, and I wanted to say good evening to those across the United States, and good evening to everyone around the world. I am Yvonne Gamble, your host. I am also the CEO of SanPete Financial Group, and we are a venture capital firm located in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. In this session, we're going to delve into the pressing issue of climate change. We want to explore the urgent need for action and steps we can take to protect our planet. As an innovation challenge judge with NASA, I review innovation pitches to determine the viability for commercialization as a venture capital to see if that is something that actually is going to be able to be commercial. Many innovations related directly to climate change, such as wildfire mitigation. One such innovation that I looked over last year from a minority serving institution proved extensively valuable during the wildfires that are sweeping through Southern California in the United States. The recently installed under the canopy, which is below the tree line, where traditional satellites cannot see, these cameras were able to show where the fire was and where it was going, which is extremely important because many times when you're looking above the canopy where the satellites can actually see, you don't really see what's going on the ground, and that ground burning can tell you in actually the direction that it's going to go in and how intense it is. And they were able to measure the intensity at ground level. These innovations are very important to evacuation, firefighter deployment, post-fire debris removal, and most importantly, searching for survivors. But I want to switch the conversation on you, and we're going to look at the most important climate change element, and that's water. Water is essential to all human life. Even when we go out into space, what are we looking for? We're looking for those planets when we say that planet will support life. The first element we're looking for, obviously, is water. If there's water, there's going to be air. If there's air, there's going to be wind. There's going to be fire. It's going to be the ability to have fire, which is going to give us that first initial heat. And then also, we're going to be able to have some sort of ground that we can actually plant food into. Those are the things we're looking for. But that most important element and first element is water. The United Nations suggests that clean water access is fundamental human right. It is a fundamental human right. The ultimate goal for all countries is to provide clean water to their citizens. Unfortunately, billions of people every year lack access to clean water, sanitation, and therefore hygiene is an issue. It is possible that new water sanitation systems and tech can help bring people clean water efficiently and effectively. So let us understand then, why do we have such a clean water crisis? Well, according to the World Health Organization, more than 2 billion people do live in communities with little to no clean water. And as the populations grow and feel the effects of climate change, the figure is increasing rapidly throughout the globe. Aside from communities in low or middle income countries, virtually all industrialized countries require water for numerous purposes. The U.S. felt these devastating effects for the lack of water to put the fires out and the disastrous effect the raging fire and emergencies exacerbated on the chronic lack of clean water for the citizens during and after the fire. So let's keep going deeper into this and look at the science behind. Since there's such an issue with getting to clean water, let's look at the science behind getting to clean water. Because most certainly, one of the things we do not have a lack of on this planet are scientists. So to fully address the lack of clean water and how to end it is to understand that science. We're going to explore 8 advanced technologies that can actually put an end to the clean water crisis. Number 1 is solar-powered filtration. Researchers at Princeton University developed a solar absorber gel that people can apply to contaminated water. This gel absorbs water at room temperature, but it changes shape and releases the water when heated. It has a second layer consisting of a polydopamine, which can transform the sun's energy into heat. The third layer is made of an aragonite. When water passes through the gel, it purifies by filtering out pathogens, metals, and other molecules from the water. The device uses a passive gravity-based filtration method. As a result, it only requires power from the sun to work. Additionally, the device can deliver clean water more quickly, more efficiently than some of the more advanced water treatment technologies that we're currently using. Number 2, the desalination systems. This process is highly popular, especially in countries in the Middle East. In this, basically, they're removing salt from salt water. And when you're in those dry, arid countries, dry, arid areas, that is a huge difference to be able to take salt out of the water. It's extracted to obtain fresh water, which can be used, obviously, for several purposes. Current desalination processes are energy intensive, but recent advancements have led to significant reduction in energy consumption. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the conversation. But one method that researchers and engineers have used to decrease energy usage is increasing the size of the membranes used to desalinate the water. Instead of using an 8-inch membrane, they're using a 16-inch membrane with smaller pores and 4 times the active area. This lowers the cost of operating and maintaining the treatment plant while increasing the amount of water that can be processed. Number 3, nanotechnology. Countries can use various nanotechnology-based water purification systems as cost-effective, efficient methods to provide water for those who need it. Nanotechnology can remove contaminants in the water to increase the availability of water. In simple terms, it manipulates the atoms in the water on the molecular level. Nanotechnology can assist with several water purification processes, including ones we spoke about: desalination, filtration, remediation, and for water treatment. And one of the most common purification techniques is in the nanospace tech, is the carbon nanotube, CNT. These CNT-based filtration systems remove organic, inorganic, and biological compounds from water to make it safe for drinking. This is one of the systems that's actually used on the International Space Station. Number 4, bioaugmentation for wastewater treatment. It is well known that wastewater is a significant source of water pollution. Not only can wastewater treatment in synthetic fertilizer for the agriculture industry, but it can transform into drinking water for consumption. One of the most popular methods of treating wastewater is bioaugmentation. With this technology, scientists introduce a mix of microorganisms to the liquid, which breaks down and removes any contaminants. The microorganisms typically consist of enzymes and certain type of safe bacteria that degrades the pollutants like oils or carbon substrates. However, the scientists must implement a multi-step process doing bioaugmentation. They must safely remove the microorganisms after they treat the wastewater. So it actually creates a two-step process. So you can take the microorganisms and you can actually remove, all of the harmful bacteria, but then you have to also remove the microorganisms after you treat the wastewater, because you don't want the microorganisms going into potable drinking water and going into the body. So that is an alternative for bioaugmentation for wastewater treatment, but it is a two-step process. And even if it's going to be utilized for agriculture, we have to also keep in mind that the agriculture does what is ultimately going to be something that's going to be consumed. So that process is, we want to keep our eyes on that particular process and learn a little bit more about it and about the safety of it. Number 5, acoustic nanotube tech. NASA first developed the acoustic nanotube technologies, which served as a solution for treating and recycling wastewater, on the ISS. That's where they first developed it. However, the technology has various purposes here on Earth. Rather than pressure pushing contaminants out of the water, this technology relies on acoustics to drive water through the carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes are placed within a filter matrix where water molecules pass through and the contaminants stay behind. The acoustic system uses an oscillator circuit to generate an acoustic vibration, which encourages the water molecules to debond and move through the filter for purification. Not a bad solution. Very good solution, and it's proven itself to be extremely reliable in moving away, debonding from those from the other contaminants, and they stay behind. And then what you get is actually fresh water for drinking and for other uses. Number 6, photocatalytic water purification. Another type of technology that helps provide people with water. This technology uses photocatalysts and ultraviolet rays to rid the water of toxic substances and contaminants at high speeds. Photocatalysts with mild conditions is a simple process and is considered a green technology, making it cost-effective and sustainable. The process can take water and remove substances such as pesticides, microbes, viruses, dyes, crude oil, and more. So it is used quite a bit, this particular technology, to purify the water, especially, in systems where farming systems where you have pesticides, or anytime they can get in microbes coming into the water, any water that has been exposed to disease or dyes or crude oil. When they around those areas, we can purify that water and turn it back into potable drinking water. Number 7 is the automatic variable filtration, AVF as it's popularly known. It's a water purification technology that is relatively simple yet very effective. It works with an upward flow of influent. It's clean through a downward flow of a filter medium. So one of the most significant benefits is the water does not require additional filtration or cleaning. So the AVF systems can be utilized very quickly and very efficiently. And basically what you don't have is you don't have to go through a dual or triple process in order for that to work. This method does not have any moving parts or require power. Obviously, that makes it even more cost-effective and energy efficient, and it is sustainable. This tech is suitable for wastewater treatment and reuse, municipal drinking water, and pre-filtration and desalination uses. So that automatic variable filtration system, the AVF, is a very cost-effective system. It is sustainable and is efficient. that can actually be used.
What happens when a group of the world's greatest minds gifted with wealth beyond our imagination buys a sprawling waterfront property in Toronto? They make plans for a $14.3 billion futuristic city, that's what. Sidewalk Labs released its Master Innovation and Development plans to turn a chunk of Toronto's Lake Ontario shoreline into the most futuristic city in the world. It would result in over 93,000 jobs and a better standard of living for its residents. And today, we're going to take a peek inside. Welcome back to our channel. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a video from us. Google X Sidewalk Smart City.
Number 8, climate change mitigation. Climate change and water scarcity go hand in hand. I know that, and we'll talk about that more, about how they wanted to take this out of many of the conversations, wanted to take water out of the conversation. I'm not sure how they came about that idea that was even possible, but as the climate changes, water is one of those things that is most effective in that change, because what happens is it causes challenges to the human race. These issues have a reciprocal relationship identified by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in which water management policies and measures can have an influence on greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, as you can see, because water is that number one element, it affects everything, the air quality, it affects just the filtration, of the air that it does naturally. All these things are affected. It affects fires, affects wind, it affects everything, and it affects the ground itself. As renewable energy options are pursued, the water consumption of these mitigation tactics must be considered in producing alternatives, ranging from bioenergy crops to hydropower and solar power plants. We must look at this in there. Some of the key impacts, I want to just kind of move us into really understanding climate change, because yes, if that climate will change, the climate is changing. There's no doubt about that. The climate is changing, and it is changing us. Whether or not we want to believe that it is changing us, it's changing the way we live, it's changing how we eat. And now with the advent of our fresh water being taken away, and we're having to rely on seawater as the waters are rising, and that seawater getting into the table of our fresh water is also going to now give us an additional issue with the lack of fresh water. So some of the key impacts of climate change on water resources: obviously changes in precipitation, more extreme weathers, heavy rainfalls leading to flooding, interspersed with longer periods of drought. Climate change, reduced snowfall and earlier snowmelt impacting water storage and snowpack. We're not getting the heavy water storage that we had in snowpack. We need that, because what happens is that water has been filtered as it has condensed and went up, and then it came back through the air, through the atmosphere. It was filtrated, goes into the snowpack, runs down the mountains, runs into the lakes and the rivers, and that's fresh water that we have. Now it's reduced. Impacts on water supply: decreased river flows and groundwater, reduce recharge due to lack of precipitation. Groundwater does not recharge because why? The river flow is not there. So that groundwater is not being able to actually release into the atmosphere. Reduced water availability. Obviously, the impact is going to be reduced water availability for agriculture and drinking water supplies. Saltwater intrusion into our coastal aquifers due to rising sea levels. That is an issue. When salt water comes into those aquifers, it mixes with the fresh water. That fresh water becomes salt water. That's why desalination and that process is extremely important and needs to be put in place in many different areas. Water quality issues. Increased algae blooms due to warmer water temperature and nutrient runoff. Higher concentrations of pollutants in water bodies due to reduced stream flow. If that stream is not flowing, you're going to get more contaminants and pollutants into that water body. It's just going to sit there, and when it starts to flow again, and it doesn't have that purification for going into the air and coming back down, you're going to have more contaminants in the water. And of course, potential contamination from increased erosion due to extreme weather conditions. On our ecosystems, there's a disruption in our aquatic habitats due to the changing water temperatures and flow patterns. We're seeing now multiple fishes on the banks, not only on the banks of beaches, but we're also seeing that on the banks of rivers and streams, because the aquatic, it is changing. Alteration of species distribution and migration patterns. Every ocean creature has to migrate, and it goes from one flow to another flow. Well, depending on how that water temperature is changed, that's going to change their internal body temperatures. That's going to change their migration patterns. So those areas where they may not be able to go there because the temperature is rising, it's too warm for them, or they simply die off. Overall, climate change is expected to exacerbate water scarcity in many regions, leading to increased competition for water resources and political conflicts over access to water. That is critical. That is a very critical issue. This is when water becomes even more of a human right, because we're going to have more conflicts over trying to access fresh water. We can leverage solar power to improve this freshwater crisis. Saudi Arabia's national agency announced a new initiative to build solar power desalination plants to reduce water and energy costs by 40%, according to Arab News report. Desalination is our strategic choice to supply an adequate amount of drinking water to people across the kingdom, remarked their finance minister Ibrahim Al-Asif at the launch ceremony. Different sources estimate between 50 to 70% of the country's drinking water is desalinated, a process that requires a lot of energy. And that's why it's turning over to the solar farming, so that can actually produce that energy, that additional energy that they need without having to run energy lines in the old traditional manner.
By 2050, our planet will be a vastly different place. By 2050, artificial intelligence will be everywhere. AI-driven stores will allow you to purchase goods without cashiers or waiting lines. AI will diagnose and treat patients, manage transportation, and analyze massive quantities of data. AI chatbots and voice recognition systems will sound like and behave just like real people. AI will be implemented into robots. By 2050, robot dogs and other pets will serve as companions. Robots will dominate factories and begin to serve as teachers, cooks, pharmacists, law enforcement officers, athletes, and other professionals. In 2050, universal translators will remove all language barriers, and voice recognition will be ubiquitous. Hundreds of sensors will be installed in our clothes, homes, and overall environment to monitor our well-being and improve our lives. Computing will change. By 2050, we may run on quantum computers. Based on the properties of quantum physics, quantum computers could deliver massive leaps in computing power, outstripping any current transistor-based models. AI and computers will integrate into humans. Brain chips like Elon Musk's Neuralink will treat neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, spinal cord injury, and blindness. These brain chips will allow people to control computers and prosthetics with no physical interaction. By 2050, we may be controlling things with our minds and communicating through brain signals. By 2050, robotic prosthetics may be stronger and more advanced than our own biological ones. Prosthetic eyes and ears will enter the market, curing blindness and deafness. And in 30 years, like AI, virtual reality will be everywhere. People will try on clothes in virtual reality closets, and holograms will bring FaceTime to a new level. VR platforms will allow you to move around while staying still. We will be able to travel the world and experience life on other planets, all from home.
Now it's your turn. What are you going to do? What are you going to help do what is your top solution for the water crisis? That's also what it leads down to. Virtually every industry in the world anticipates sweeping systematic transformation over the next decades in your strategic planning, production practices, and business models. According to a sustainability survey poll on water, the Global Opinion Poll was which released a survey of more than 1,200 sustainability experts, concluded that water shortages will shift public perception of the value of water, prompting governments and companies to view clean water not as a commodity to exploit, but as a human right to access the precious resource. The survey was conducted by GlobalScan, an international public and stakeholder opinion research firm, and Sustainability, which is a think tank and business strategy consultancy. The overarching question that was asked by the poll is, what are the technologies or changes in behavior, so the behaviors of the consumer, that's of you, to show the most promising of addressing water shortages over the next 10 years. Their response generated about 19 consensus solutions. We're only going to take a look at about 15 of them here, because these were the ones that I pulled out of that report and kind of shown as something that, yes, we can do and we are doing. And this will come from, these I pulled out would be those solutions that specifically would come from businesses, innovators, and consumers. Businesses, those are those businesses that are already established and they use water on a day-to-day basis in their business. Innovators, those people who are coming up with something new, some new project, some new technology that they can bring to the market to abate this issue. And of course, from consumers, those of you who actually consume the water. So number one, educate to change consumption and lifestyles. In the end, change in the face of a crisis, no matter what that crisis is, involves education. So you can, to be motivated for new behaviors. Coping with the coming era of water scarcity will require a major overhaul of all forms of consumption, from individual use to the supply chains of major corporations, like GE and what have you. Some regions led by India, Australia, and Southwest US are already facing a freshwater crisis. The most critical task is making sure the problem is much better understood worldwide, because what happens on one side of the world affects what happens on the other side of the world. We are no longer where it's simply in my area alone, and so therefore all I have to do is solve the problems in my backyard. No, everything that we do, every place we go, every step we take as far as water, we can see that water, that's going to spread across the world. Number two, invent new with the innovations, invent new water conservation technologies. Specifically in areas where aquifers are drying up and rainwater is increasingly unpredictable, innovation is needed. But as we attempt to cope with freshwater scarcity and develop these conservation technologies, energy consumption is also an important consideration. So, we have to we have to find that balance in that, and as we are innovating. Number three, recycling of wastewater. During March World Day, panelists urged a new mindset to cut. Some countries like Singapore are trying to recycle to cut water imports and become more self-sufficient. When you have to import water into your country, that is going to drive a major issue, because now you're looking at a supply chain. issue. Now you're looking at being able to have that distribution issue. Once that supply chain actually comes to your country, now you got to distribute that out to everyone. So those can be major issues. And if trade and investment and tariffs are put on, that's going to be even more. Now, not only do you have the water treatment, or do you have the water as an issue, now you have how you actually get the water becomes more of an issue. This rich East Asian Republic is leading in developing advanced technologies that cleanses wastewater for other uses, including drinking. So what they are doing is they are going to be going more aggressively, and many of the different outlying countries and need to also be looking at that, so that everything becomes a recycled type atmosphere, as opposed to we're making use of our already decreased resource of fresh water. Number 4, improve irrigation in agricultural practices. 70% of the world's fresh water is used for agriculture. Improving irrigation can help supply and these gaps. In certain cases, irrigation practices for an earlier era, that's what we're still doing. We haven't changed how we irrigate. We haven't changed that we irrigate or what we irrigate or what. And today it is weakening the ability of farmers to provide food and fiber to a growing world. This is why, if you ever ask the question, why is the advent of GMOs, genetically modified organism, has taken off? Why is the use and the advent of plastic has we've seen that 10x in growth just in the last 20 years. And that's going to continue to grow because of the lack of water and being able to irrigate those plants that grow naturally, or to irrigate the trees that grow naturally, to use paper products to be able to to create and use for packaging. So one issue, one problem, water, that element, as you can see, and the lack thereof, it does what? It actually then makes a difference on something else. Appropriately priced water. Water pricing and rights go hand in hand. This is an area that we will have to show that the current utility pricing systems are obsolete and they're sending the wrong signals and they need to reform. This is where the consumer councils on water, the organizations that deal with water, that fight these water and water rights issues, are really going to have to step up and come to the forefront to address this. Because what happens is water scarcity becomes a major issue. You can most certainly expect that the pricing and the cost of your everyday drinking water is only going to go up exponentially. Number 6, develop energy efficient desalination plants. We spoke about this earlier. And so typically the Middle East has capitalized on this with large reserves to build these big desalination plants. And so therefore the remainder of the world is also going to have to take on and do this. Britain has taken a different approach. They have small scale facilities for agriculture, but these innovations bring light to another needed resource. Obviously, we always return back to capital. That's why you have a person like me who heads up a venture capital firm speaking on this issue, because what happens with all of this, to do all of this, it costs, and the costs are exponential. And so therefore, that's why we're in these conversations and we're having this. We see the need, we see the problems, and we understand that it takes funding and it takes mega dollars, multi-million dollars and billion-dollar fundings to actually make these things come to fruition. Number 7, improve water catchment and harvesting. Many times when we think about water catchment and harvesting, we're thinking about countries, in Pakistan, India, and 2 of these have, contended with some of the worst effects of climate change. And they are overhauling their rainwater systems. And these efforts provide independent control of water resources. And that is very good, because as long as you continue to do that and you continue to make these harvesting and catchment type systems, you can address those rural populations, as well as you can take those aquifers and make them to address a city center. Number 8, look to community-based governance and partnerships. Community organizations, the consumer organizations, elevate the experiences of those whose voices merit more influence. Indigenous groups met in Bolivia at an alternative climate conference, and they met to foster international partnerships among underrepresented groups. So therefore, there are groups around the world. Your group is not the only one that's underrepresented in your country. You have the same things that are ensuring more effective governance at the grassroots level around the world. And it helps to give community stature and can lead to effective policy changes on a global scale. And so sometimes what you want to do is not just simply look across the road, look across from state to state, but look from country to country and see who else is having those same problems. And then that way we can have those changes actually be affected upon those global serving organizations, which most companies and most countries are a part of. Number 9, develop and enact better policies and regulations. Takes you right into that. As water scarcity complicates food scarcity, pollution, governments have to redefine their role. The U.S. government is considering expanding this Clean Water Act to ensure more protections. One of the largest bodies of fresh water, regardless of what path these elected leaders take, they are considering multiple approaches. That's why we need multiple voices. That's why we need the businesses to come to the forefront. We need the innovators to come to the forefront, and we need the consumers to come to the forefront. These 3 areas making their voices known, because why? They're going to be the ones who are truly going to be most affected, because that then represents the general population of a country, of an area. And so therefore, because they're the ones that are the most affected, they need to be there at the table with the loudest voice on what is happening, because it's happening directly to them. Number 10, improve the distribution infrastructure. Poor infrastructure is devastating to health and economy. We saw that in the United States in Flint, Michigan. Old pipes, old infrastructure, and we are a newer country. When we are using these old pipes to distribute water, or these old ways, what happens? It only diminishes the quality of life, it adds to the cost, and it exacerbates the issue, where even if you do have fresh water, you can't get it to the people without contaminants in that water. And so therefore, when you're going to countries, you go into old world countries, their piping, their water systems are even older. And what happened? It allows preventable waterborne diseases to spread among vulnerable populations. And this is especially the children are suffering from this. And it's not only, many times we try to attribute this as being confined to the developing world. It's not. Pipes burst. They don't burst in a developing world out in a rural area. They burst inside of a major city. And that's where the pipes burst. And now you have an issue on top of an issue on top of a scarcity. Number 11, we have to shrink the corporate water footprint. Industrial water use accounts for approximately 22% of global consumption. And what has to happen is, with the industrial water use, that has to be recycled at the highest level, meaning they have to adapt recycling reusable technology so they can turn that wastewater into something that is potable and drinkable. Because what they're using is, they are using fresh water. So they're taking fresh water, 22% of the fresh water around the globe, for the corporate and for the business use. And so therefore, what does that do? What does that leave everyone else? And what they're putting out is what, if it's not filtered back, recycled into the system, then is put out as contaminated water. And that goes into our groundwater, that goes into our food chain, and it's right back again. So you see, we create our own problems, we create our own issues. Therefore, we are then the ones to actually eliminate these issues. Number 12, build international frameworks and institutional cooperations. Binding international accords for national resource issues are hard to achieve. We know that. It goes without saying. 2009 UN climate change in Copenhagen was evidence of this point. And it's not just because of the freshwater crisis. The most visible and dire of the climate change risk was ignored. They ignored that the freshwater was at a crisis, took it out of the agreement. But policymakers and advocates need to keep trying. Just because they took that out, we know that it's not right to take it out. You cannot take it out and just merely dismiss it or set it to the side and then pretend as though it doesn't exist or it's not a problem. You have to address the problem. The problem is not going to go away, and it's not going to take care of itself. Humanitarian-oriented treaties such as UN's Drinking Water Millennium Development Goals indicate that comprehensive goal strategies are possible, and we have to start looking at how to integrate those into our climate change policies. Global. Number 13, public common resources, equitable access. That's where we get into the issue where we're going to start having the over fresh water. One of the key United Nations Millennium Development Goals is ensuring access to drinking water. While the steps to achieve this goal are being debated, the thesis that water is a basic right comes into play. So as countries such as Chile attempt to reform water rights, U.S. politicians are considering how access rights translate into federal protection of places like Lake Michigan, which is one of the world's largest reserves of fresh water. So that's where, now we get to the point of we're in a push-pull situation where we have to fix these problems that we see are coming and ensuing, and before we get to the point where we're standing out here and we're actually tussling over fresh drinking water. 14, R&D, research and development, innovation. Access to water in a water-scarce world will become a much higher priority into business decisions. Communities are likely to pursue public-private partnerships that draw on new innovations. That's why at the top of all this, what did I say? I said it has to be the businesses, the innovators, and the consumers. One example could be cities that operate sewage treatment plants are likely to pursue partnerships with clean energy producers to fertilize algae and other biofuel crops with wastewater. But that wastewater, before you actually put it on those crops, needs to be clean, needs to be decontaminated. You cannot take and put contaminated water onto crops and then expect that to solve the problem, because that crop is going to be harvested and the people are going to eat it. So we have to really be careful about all these things, what we do, and we have to look at that circle and that cycle. That recycle is more than simply taking wastewater and reusing it. as it is, but you have to take into highest consideration, especially if that comes out of a chemical plant. So you have to look at what types of things are actually in this wastewater before I reuse it. Number 15, water projects in developing countries, transfer of technology. We have to be able to transfer this technologies in those developing countries, because many of the developing countries, if you look at the populations and the population density, and you look at their ability to utilize fresh water and to produce wastewater, it's either way, it's going to be higher than in some of your highly industrialized and developed nations. Their populations are going to be lower. But so what is that going to say? The water table, the water base will become contaminated if you don't transfer those same technologies that you have in those highly developed nations over to the underdeveloping nation. Climate change and water scarcity are producing the most dramatic consequences in those regions, such as India, Sub-Saharan Africa. One proposed solution is to transfer water conservation technologies to these dry areas. To achieve this, we are going to have to upskill the people there on the ground, the consumers. So the businesses will have to be trained and upskill the consumers who consume this new innovation that's coming out, this new technology that's going to be transferred to them. They are going to have to be upskilled. They're going to have skills training, not at the government level, but at the actual consumer, the user level. So that they need to have that, and they need to have that immediately. That's not something that we can sit around and wait on, for the next 100 years, and then we'll start to do something about this. By that time, we would have dried up into dust. Although today we have talked extensively about water, as it is the most important element in climate change, let us be reminded of the elements that extend from water, and those are air, wind, and fire. The factor that has the most impact on all of these is the human factor. The climate will continue to change. What we do will determine how we will change. I want to thank you all in Davos at the World Economic Forum for being a part of this conversation and for letting it be live streamed into the unDavos Summit. And I want to thank all of those who joined from the US and those who joined in from around the world. Thank you for being a part of this crucial conversation about the future of our planet. Together, we can change the climate before it changes us.
Financing your next $1 billion? Contact us to be a guest. Join us for the next show.